Let's bring in NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Veronica Cardenas is a former assistant chief counsel for ICE and founder of Humanigration. And MSNBC political analyst and former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo joins us as well. Julia, I want to start with this state of emergency and how we're going to see it manifest itself.
Right. Well, of course, Trump has issued a state of emergency so that he can use the military at the border. He was pretty clear, though, in the executive order that the military would only be used for to build deportation space and to do transportation at the border. They would not violate the Constitution by going and arresting migrants. Of course, that could change if they do any kind of operations in Mexico now that he's designated some of the cartels and gangs there as foreign terrorist organizations. But this national emergency could also allow him to use this Alien Invasion Act, where he's going to be able to vastly expand the way DOD works with ICE to expand detention. But I wanted to zero in for a second there on what Homan said, because I actually had a chance just to speak to Homan shortly after he made those remarks right down here in our lobby. And I said, look, the way you're talking, we're trying to figure out if something here has actually changed. Are these just day-to-day operations? Because believe it or not, arrests and deportations happened all the time under the Biden administration. I was just on a flight last week that took 100 people back to Honduras. And so he said the change here is that they've assigned more people, but he declined to say how many people ICE had now assigned to these operations. What we could see is kind of a compression. Anything they were going to be doing over the next month, they'll now try to do in a 3-week or 3-day or week-long span, Chris. So I think that's something to watch for. What is actually changing on the ground? Because as we saw in the last administration, there can be big, broad swaths of executive order that's actually pretty hard to carry out in practice.
Well, Veronica, from a real world, day-to-day perspective, how do these orders change the situation for people following the letter of our immigration law, for those who may not be following the law? How do you read what we just heard reported by Julia?
I think that one of the things I do want to point out is the way this is going to change. I think the investigations, the targeted approach that Homan had talked about, that has always been done. But I think what's going to change in this administration is the arrest of collaterals. And collaterals is anyone who is in the vicinity, who's in the area of these targeted investigations. And we have heard Homan state this before, that everyone should fear immigration. Everyone should fear this. And so what I believe they're going to do is make the conditions so harsh, so unjust, that migrants are just going to throw their hands up and voluntarily go home.
All right, Congressman, I also want to talk about what has gotten a lot of attention. More than 20 state attorneys general are challenging President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship. Is this most likely, do you think, to be decided in the courts, by Congress, neither? What happens with birthright citizenship?
Chris, this will very likely end up being decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. And this has been a point of emphasis from Donald Trump back since 2018. I remember right before those midterm elections, the first of his first term, he was talking about this issue. And a lot of Republicans running at the time, myself included, were worried that that was going to be hurtful in swing districts. And Republicans did suffer a pretty big defeat in the 2018 election. But this is something that there's a lot of consensus that this is firmly grounded in the Constitution, in the 14th Amendment. So definitely this will go to the courts. Maybe you'll get some kind of nuanced decision by the Supreme Court. But it's important to note that the order only affects people being born as of the next, after the next 30 days in the country. So it's not retroactive. That should really calm a lot of people's fears. And secondly, I do believe that ultimately the courts will sustain what has been just commonly held over a long time now, that this is firmly ingrained in the Constitution.
And Veronica, so many things going on. President Trump also reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy that requires asylum seekers to wait there for their court hearings. But former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson predicted that that move could backfire. I want to play what he said.
Mexico has to agree to the program.
Right.
And I suspect what this administration does not appreciate is a large reason why the numbers have gone down so significantly is because the Mexican government is doing more on their southern border with Central America
right.
to turn these people around. If you all of a sudden unilaterally say to Mexico, you're keeping these people, it makes it less likely that they're going to cooperate with us. And the number's going to go up.
And Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said that it's important to always keep a cool head regarding Trump's immigration orders. But what impact would a reinstated Remain in Mexico policy have on asylum seekers?
Essentially, I think what this move is doing is really taking away asylum as we know it. It is the beginning of the end. And that's because having people stay in Mexico to go through their asylum case just brings so many legal hurdles. Number one, the access to counsel. It is very difficult for immigration attorneys right now to deal with and to contact clients that are detained in Louisiana, that are detained in Calexico. I can't imagine the difficulty that it's going to be to speak to clients who are detained in Mexico because of a large array of issues. And then there's the issues of going across the border to physically meet with them, because attorneys do need to physically meet with their clients. And then the issues of crime. A lot of these asylum seekers, they're so vulnerable, and they're being pushed into more vulnerable situations where they will be preyed by Mexican cartels. The women, the children, they will be sexually abused. And essentially, the U.S. government is just taking a step back from that and letting Mexico handle this. So I do agree with the statement that more people are going to try to come in and seek asylum from a safe place.
These very complicated issues that maybe cannot be resolved by the stroke of a pen. I want to go on to something else, if I can, Congressman, as a final look, because included in this blitz of executive orders is a promise to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization and the proclamation that there are only two genders, male and female. Do you think these kinds of things, are they for show? Are they to placate his base? Do they present a real concern?
Look, Chris, of course there are concerns. If the United States starts withdrawing from international organizations, that means that we no longer have a voice at those organizations. Now, I will say these are wins for Donald Trump that I don't think have a very high cost here at home. I don't think there are a lot of people worried about whether or not we're in the World Health Organization. And I do think Republicans, and especially Trump, perceive that they are on offense when it comes to culture war issues. Republicans believe that this last election result confirms that most Americans are with them on culture issues. So I think they're going to keep pushing on this front. The question is how far they push, right? And we'll see in the 2026 elections if they have gone too far or not. But for right now, Republicans are very confident that most Americans support this push on the cultural front and this withdrawal from international organizations.